Sister-in-law demands to bring her dog to my wedding, but I refuse and now family is upset. Despite the drama, I stand by my decision not to allow her dog at the event. So I 35 am getting married in 2 months. My fiancée, Sarah, and I have been planning this wedding for over a year, and we're both excited. It's going to be a relatively small event with close family and friends. Very intimate. We're having it at this beautiful outdoor venue with a lovely garden, something we've dreamed of for a long time. Here's the issue: my sister-in-law, Emily, has this dog. And by this dog, I mean a tiny, yappy Pomeranian that she takes everywhere. I'm talking everywhere: family dinners, grocery shopping, you name it. Emily's super attached to her dog, and she assumes that wherever she goes, the dog goes too. It's basically like her emotional support animal, though not officially. A couple of weeks ago, she casually mentioned that she couldn't wait for the wedding and joked about what the dog would wear. I laughed, thinking she was kidding, then it hit me she wasn't. She fully intends to bring her dog to our wedding. I told her flat out, sorry, no dogs at the wedding. Emily got really upset and told me that her dog is like family. She claimed it would be cruel to leave him behind for an entire day, and that she couldn't enjoy the wedding if she was worrying about him the whole time. She even said, well, you know dogs can sense love, right? What's more loving than a wedding? Sarah and I talked about it, and we both agree that a wedding is not the place for a dog, especially one that barks at random and can be a bit of a handful. Not to mention, my aunt is allergic to dogs and the venue has a strict no pets policy. I explained all of this to Emily, but she insists that I'm being unreasonable and that everyone knows how much her dog means to her. Now, my future mother-in-law is involved, and she's siding with Emily, saying that family is family and I should just let her bring the dog to keep the peace. But Sarah's standing by me, and we don't want to compromise the atmosphere of our wedding for one guest's dog. Eta for sticking to my no-dog rule and refusing to let Emily bring her pet to our wedding.
Next story.
Excluding my son from our girls' night after he expressed wanting to join, and now he's upset, claiming I'm playing favorites with my daughters. I, 41F, have 2 children, Layla, 17F, and Jacob, 15M. I want to clarify that I love them both equally and have always tried to make sure that none of my children felt like I had a favorite child. My husband, 43M, on the other hand, very clearly prefers our son. He was very happy to have a daughter and a really great dad to her, but it's clear that he gets along with Jacob more, mainly because they're both boys and enjoy the same things. They both love football and baseball and often go see a match together or spend weekend playing or talk about it together. This became more important when Jacob got older and started getting into sports more. I get that it's easier for my husband to talk to our son about things they both love, but it's been making me sad to see our daughter excluded from their conversations or activities together. My husband doesn't do a lot of things with Layla. They sometimes watch movies together, but most of the time it's either my husband and Jacob doing something, just the 2 of them, or the 4 of us together. For that reason, I recently decided to start doing things with my daughter, just the 2 of us. These past 2 to 3 months we've gone to the movies, to the mall, had girls' night, went to a bowling alley, and many more things. I can see that it makes my daughter happy, so I thought it was a great thing. My husband never complained about it, mainly because we mostly did this when the boys were doing something together. A week ago, there was an open-air projection of Tangled, which has been Layla's favorite movie since she was maybe 6 or 7, and I had planned on going for weeks. The problem is, my husband found out 4 days prior that he had to go away for work that same night. He asked me to stay home and said that we could just watch another movie together, the 3 of us. I said no, because this night was important to me and my daughter. And our son also said that he was completely fine staying home alone and would play video games with his friends. My husband didn't say anything, but I could tell it bothered him. When he came back from his work trip, he got really mad at me and told me he didn't believe we actually went and excluded Jacob and that I was playing favorites because I decided to have a night with only Layla. I told him about how he always spent time with Jacob and asked if he really couldn't tell how Layla was hurt by that. He said that I was being ridiculous and that it wasn't his fault Layla didn't share any of his interests. I told him that it was his role as a parent to try to connect with his child, and he yelled at me, telling me not to give him parenting lessons when I was a bad mother. He has barely been talking to me since then and is very cold dry. I get his point because I always promised myself never to treat my children differently. But at the same time, seeing how happy it made my daughter, I'm not sure I made the wrong choice.
Next story.
Exposing my parents for forgetting about me on their wedding day after they left me behind and didn't even realize it until the end of the night. TL Drive, my parents were married a couple of weeks ago in Hawaii, and they invited my siblings and a few friends but forgot to include me in any part of the planning, the ceremony, or the trip, so I exposed them on social media and now they are furious. I know this seems like a weird situation, but I just feel so angry and depressed that I feel the need to vent, even if no one is listening. So I, 17F, was recently forgotten about on the day of my parents' wedding. My parents have been together for about 25 years, but they never actually got married. That's why when my dad, 50M, proposed to my mother, 49F, on their anniversary, which they have always celebrated on the date my mother found out she was pregnant with my eldest sister, even tough they were already together before everyone, including me, was elated and celebrated the occasion with great joy. This happened all the way back in February. They immediately jumped into wedding planning, deciding very early on a small event in Hawaii with just the closest family and friends for an intimate ceremony. Almost immediately, my mother asked my sister 25F to be her maid of honor, and my dad asked my brother 22M to be his groomsman. I wasn't surprised or offended by this. My sister had always been a mommy's girl, and they both enjoyed spending time with each other shopping and socializing, so they had a very close bond, and the same goes for my father and brother. They always played football together and messed around with cars. My father even trained my brother's team for a while in middle school. That had always left me as the odd one out. I tried to insert myself on my family's hobbies and groups that they had within our home, but was always rebuffed. Maybe they could sense that my interest on their activities wasn't all that genuine, or maybe they just didn't care. Either way, I was used to being the last and least important member of my family. Mom had sis and dad had bro. My parents had each other, and my two siblings were closer to each other than they ever were to me, leaving me very lonely and isolated in my own home. During the preparation for the wedding, initially it was suggested that I be the flower girl, but my sister thought that role would be more appropriate for her daughter 3F, so that idea was quickly tossed away. Later on, my maternal grandmother suggested that I might read a poem or do a little bit of a speech during the ceremony, but both my parents refused because they wanted the wedding to be low-key, and they didn't think a cheesy and sappy speech would fit their vision, their literal words. I was still okay with all of this, even though it hurt to know I would be the only member of the family to not actually be part of the wedding party or have any role at all on the day. As the day approached, my parents and siblings got more and more caught up on all the wedding planning. I noticed my mom didn't invite me dress shopping, that whenever they would have discussions about the venue or the event, I was left out, so I decided to see if they would realize that I wasn't being involved at all and kept quiet, waiting for them to ask me something, anything, about the wedding, but that never happened. The wedding was set for 3 weeks ago, the end of August. The day before the departure, my mother casually asked if I had my luggage ready because we couldn't be late to the airport. I bluntly told her that I hadn't prepared anything. She got confused for a second and then snapped at me for not being prepared. I then asked her if I even had a ticket, and her face went pale. Yep, they hadn't even bought me a ticket, and I'm not even sure if I had a room or any accommodations once there. Even though I was the only person in my family without a stable income, I work as a part-time babysitter. My parents had bought first-class tickets for my siblings and the couple other friends that were attending the wedding but had forgotten me. My mom told me not to make a big deal out of it and that they can just find me a low-cost ticket last minute from a cheap airline. But I just replied by asking her then, what? Do I even have a dress for the ceremony? She went with sis to buy hers and all the other female guests months ago, but I wasn't included. That's when my father came in and just told me to suck it up and that I've never been a girly girl, so I could just wear whatever. I got mad at this because even though I'm not the most feminine girl on the planet, I would have loved to be included in such an important part of my parents' wedding. And it was about the fact that I was excluded for literally everything that had been going on for months. We all got into a fight with them, calling me entitled and accusing me of making myself small intentionally so they would forget me like that as a valid excuse for ignoring a child. They ended up telling me that if I was going to keep this attitude, I might as well skip the whole thing altogether, to which I responded with a defiant fine and went to my room. Next morning, they all left for Hawaii without me. The ceremony was really small, but they all posted loads of pictures on Insta and Facebook about how perfect and magical that whole week was being. People realized quickly that I wasn't in any of the photos and asked my parents why, to which they replied that unfortunately I had caught COVID before the trip and had to stay behind. My blood boiled at this. I don't know why this was the straw that broke the camel back for me, but it was. I decided to take a COVID test and published a picture of myself holding the negative test and captioned it, "Not sick at all, just forgotten." I tagged everyone that had questioned my absence from the trip and the wedding in the picture, and, for good measure, also every person invited to it. I also wrote in the comments about how my parents had literally forgotten about anything to do with me until the day before parting and how they actually uninvited me. Most people were on my side and others couldn't believe it and thought there must be something more to the story than what I was saying, but one thing is for certain. I completely ruined my parents' wedding, and their day was overshadowed by my confession. At first, I felt quite satisfied with myself for standing up on my own, but after a barrage of messages from my family calling me every name in the book, and later, when they came back, them furiously attacking me for my immature actions and my spoiled behavior, my pride deflated quickly, and I began to feel awful. I hate my family and I hate being in this house, but I'm a minor and can't leave just yet. I do feel like I could have handled the situation better though, and now I feel so depressed that I'm second-guessing everything I did, from not speaking up before to the way I exposed them. I also feel guilty for the lack of connection between all of my family and me, and maybe I could have done more. So ATA for ruining my parents' wedding when they forgot about me.